Hey friends, welcome back. This is Monday, September 11th, 9/11, 2016. Where were you? 2017. I don't know what year it is. Where were you 16 years ago? I guess that's what I was going to say. Uh, I thought, if you don't mind, some of you will love this, others will just like it. Let me put on my teacher hat, which today happens to be a Marine Corps hat. Let me put on my teacher hat for just a while. I mentioned this very briefly on Saturday when I started this series of about 20 abstract paintings that I'm doing this weekend. It's a subject I call the categories of abstract art or categories of abstract painting. Okay? And let me restate, if you heard me say this the other day, forgive me for the repetition. I'm an absolute self-confessed card-carrying abstract painting snob. By which I mean, I think there is some really good abstract painting out there in the world, and there's some really bad. I don't know how else to put it. I could put it much more crudely, but I'll just leave it at that. Just some really bad abstract painting, and it's because a lot of artists have this notion that with abstract painting, anything goes. You can do whatever you want. I mean, you don't have to have any skill whatsoever. All you have to do is have an attitude and just start throwing stuff on the canvas and it'll turn out good. Well, every once in a while something will turn out good. In fact, by the way, if you happen to be the kind of personality that tends to throw stuff on a canvas, then there's a decent chance you'll produce something good, because that is in fact one of the categories of abstract painting, which I call kinesthetic or movement-oriented abstract painting. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So I think there's good painting and bad painting, good abstract painting and good bad abstract painting. And I think the next time I have to judge, a local show of some kind, which I do fairly occasionally, I might take this piece of paper with me and hand this out to all the abstract painters. It's very difficult when you're called upon to judge an art show, and there's photography and representational painting and abstract painting. So maybe I need to come up with one of these for photography, but I think people know there's good photography. Anyway, I digress again. I better get to the subject. I have here 6 descriptions or 6 categories. Either word would work. When you see a good abstract painting, I put my hand here because I'm hoping this is a medium good one. Anyway, I'm going to use it as an example. I have several done from this weekend and several like this that are still in process. Okay, here are the 6 categories. I'm going to give them to you real quick, then I'm going to go back and describe them. Ready? Here it is. Number 1, material-oriented or material-focused abstract. That is the stuff it's made of. Number 2, movement-oriented. I've already described that. Movement-oriented abstract painting. Number 3, or kinesthetic abstract. Number 3, process-oriented abstract painting. 4, design-oriented abstracts. 5, image-oriented. Image. That means it's not a picture of a thing, but you use pictures to make the thing. Does that make sense? It's not a picture of Grandma's tobacco barn, but you might take a potato stamp that you've put Grandma's tobacco barn on and go like this, and it becomes an image-oriented abstract painting. Get it? That's a pretty ridiculous example, but just bear with me. And number 6 is chance-oriented or chance-focused abstract painting. That is where everything or a lot of what happens on the canvas is up to chance, just the way the paint falls or whatever falls, okay? Let me go back now and describe each of these a little bit more carefully. Material-oriented. That means that when the artist was creating this piece, he or she was very focused on stuff, the stuff. And I wish I had I do have one of these up in the attic that I did a couple years ago that I'm quite fond of. And the stuff was styrofoam, concrete patch, dirt from the front yard, rubber cement, and a couple other things that I can't remember. Joint compound and Bondo. So in that project, I was very, from the get-go, I knew what I was going to use. I knew the stuff, and it was all about stuff. Does that make sense? So there's some abstract paintings out there. I can almost remember this guy's name. It'll come back to me in a minute. It'll have to come back to me because right now I can't remember it. Anyway, some beautiful stuff. These paintings tend to be not paintings. They tend to be, they use a canvas at all, it's like stuff stacked on top of the canvas. Okay, so there's acorns falling outside. There's stuff-oriented or material-oriented abstracts. Number 2, movement-oriented. This is what I've described. Willem de Kooning, who, by the way, I do not like his artwork pretty much at all. No, really, truly, I don't. I don't think he's a genius at all. I absolutely do not think he's a genius, and a whole bunch of other people. But he's a good example of kinesthetic because he painted like this, and you can tell that he painted like this. Along those lines, Jackson Pollock is perhaps a milder example where he's dripping the paint, dripping, dripping, dripping. It's very kinesthetic. It's very movement oriented. So he's not as strong an example as Willem de Kooning, but where it's the movement. Okay. Number 3, process oriented. That is, this is important. That is, before the artist starts, he or she has this process in mind. They're going to do what old Professor Mine used to call one-ly, two-ly, three-ly. They're going to do this, and then they're going to do this, and then do this, and this, and this, and see what happens. Okay, so that's what it's very fun. A lot of, tons of MFA matriculants, graduates are big time into process oriented. That's a judgment on my part. A lot of MFA people are getting process-oriented abstract art. Number 4 is design-oriented abstract art. That means people that are usually working like traditional painters, and they're very conscious of the two-dimensional design: line, shape, value, design, texture, composition in particular. Okay? And number 5 is image-oriented. I've already mentioned real quickly. What's his name? With the Campbell soup cans. Andrew Warhol. With the Campbell soup cans, or the Marilyn Monroe, or the Elvis Presley, Marilyn Monroe. Boom, 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 boom. The point is, it was not supposed to be a painting of Marilyn Monroe. It was a Marilyn Monroe icon image stamped here, 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 here. So it was image oriented. Another example of that would be Robert Indiana, where he used maps or the number 5. Have I got that right? Am I using the right? And the other guy who wrote the word love, L-O-V-E. Very, very, very famous. L-O at an angle, V-E. It's not a painting of love. It's not strictly even a painting of the word love. It's an abstract painting where he used the word love as the image. Does that make sense? I'm cutting it a little close there. And number 6 is chance-oriented. I remember years ago some guy who would take a canvas out in the woods and leave it there like for 6 months or a year and a half, and then bring it back and hang it up and say, there, I'm done. That's what I wanted. I want to see, leaves fell on it, an animal fell over and died on it and corrupted, and so on and so forth, and it got rained on and so on. That's a very, very extremely ridiculous, chance-oriented, but can be fun. A much simpler example of chance is anytime I take a brush and go, fwuck. Fwuck is a word, F-W-O-K, fwuck. That's the sound of spattering paint. Now, here's the important part. So those are 6 categories. You don't have to repeat them all, but I want you to have in mind. The question is, which one is best? Which one is most important? Which should you do? And if you're an artist, I want you to listen to this answer right now, because this is for you. If you're an abstract artist, here's the answer. Which one should you use? The answer is all 6. Not necessarily on every single painting. But if you are an abstract painter and you're not focusing on materials, you're not as good as you could be. If you're not focused on movement, you're not that good. If you're not focused on process, I don't trust your paintings. Number 4, if you're not focused on design, you're painting, spell that any way you want. If optional, you can use image oriented, and I think you should. In other words, the best abstract paintings use all of these. Now, just before I go, I want to just point at this canvas, this board, which is not a fantastic painting, but it's not quite done. It's okay. Let me tell you how each of those principles applies to this. Number 1, material oriented. And I'm going to pick you up here for just a second so you can see this up close, because I want you to see some of the material. First of all, can I get that in focus? Come on. There we go, close enough. You can see that this is a 3-dimensional transparent kind of paint. I'll call it some weird stuff that I picked up probably at a craft store somewhere. It comes in a little bottle like this. Again, I'm sorry that's not in focus. Come on, focus for me. It's not going to. Okay, comes in that bottle, and I drizzled it. So that is materials oriented. Also, I could say to some degree that the mere fact that I'm painting both of these paintings, the one on the back and the one on the front, on gator board as opposed to canvas, is a material decision. Does that make sense? It's a conscious decision to paint on board instead of canvas. Let me think. Anything else? Probably not. That's good enough here. So number 1 category is materials focused. Number 2 category is movement oriented. Sorry, that was out of focus. And there's definitely not as much here as in some of my paintings, but at some point you can tell that I took a great big brush like this right here, and I made very bold movements. Boom, 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 boom. Do you see that? Definitely material. And then when I took this strange stuff here, like look at down here in this corner, these big arcs like that. Boom. Anytime you see something like that, it's obvious the artist went, oh, oh. And that's exactly, and then these circles that I made here. Okay, so there's a lot of movement-oriented art going on in this painting. So material focused, movement focused, process focused. Yes, yes, yes. On all of the paintings that I'm doing this weekend, I'm very definitely process focused because I know that I'm going to do step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Way back at the beginning of this particular painting, I'm looking for some things here. I had these furniture the things that go on the bottom of your chair legs so that it doesn't scratch the floor. And you can see I had them stuck on here. I had about 10 of them stuck on them and then pulled them off, so I end up with these dots. Why? Because it's process. I want to do that first and then come back and do a layer, let that dry, come back and do another layer, let that dry, come back and do another layer and let that dry. So there's quite a bit of process, and these weren't like random, they were more or less planned out ahead of time. And that's the difference between, let me turn you around just for a second. I want to make one important distinction here. The difference between process-oriented art and goofing around, experimental. Experimental is okay, but process-oriented means you have a plan ahead of time. You're not just, well, let's see what happens next. And I'll confess that this painting right here has a little bit of that in it, but it definitely had some. I had some idea what I was going to do from the beginning. So I want to make that distinction because process-oriented is you have a plan ahead of time and you execute the plan A, B, C, 1, 2, 3 in order. And it's not just the same as like, what would happen if I did this? That's not process. That's just experimental. Experimental's okay, but that's not process. Okay, turn you back around again. So far, this one painting right here has got material, movement, process in it, and design. Now, I'm really big on design. And let me show you the design. So there's a couple things. Number one, there's a band of objects right here. Look, it's classic 1/3 from the top. Classic horizon line. And then there's a band of stuff right here that's classic 1/3 from the right. And the two images intersect right here, so we have sort of a right angle, what Edgar Payne would call a right angle. In fact, you could call this a suspended steelyard. There's actually a name, I'm borrowing it from Edgar Payne, for this shape. Big shape, horizontal, small shape, because these drips produce a bit of a movement coming down here. Okay, so composition, and this is, again, I'll turn you around for a second. This is probably my biggest beef with way too many abstract painters. And again, I'm talking to you guys, I hope some abstract painters will see this, because they attack their canvases, composition, what's that? I don't know what composition is. And it looks like they don't know what composition is. I'm really being mean today. I'm really trying to get the point across. Man, I want you to paint well. I want you to paint good. Bad grammar, you got the point. So composition, the law of thirds, which I just demonstrated. Let me turn you around again. Here's a little something that helps keep me on track. Edgar Payne Basic Composition Design Stems by Edgar Payne, interpreted by myself. The black and white stuff here in the middle, that's Edgar Payne's work. He says that he says basically, and he's a pretty good painter, so you should pay attention to what he says. He says basically every good painting ever painted if it's a good painting, it fell into one of those design categories. So that's what's keeping me on track. Let me turn you back around again. So I've done material, movement, process, design, and image-oriented. Now, we could almost say on this one, this is a bit of a stretch, but there were 2 times that I used not image per se, but shapes, in this case round. I used this thing right here, put paint on the edge of it, and then plunked it down. And I also used something else, I'm not sure what. No, something bigger than that. I made a bunch of circles, and then later on I came back again with that drippy paint and made more circles. So is this a painting of circles? No, it's a painting that uses circles. See, circle, 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 circle. One, 2, 3 different ways of applying circles. And so is it a painting of circles? No, but it is a painting that uses circles. It almost is an image. That's not quite as dynamic as, Marilyn Monroe repeated, but that's all right. And finally, the last category is chance-oriented. Chance-oriented abstract. The artist creates using a high degree of pure coincidence or chance. Something as simple as be considered chance. And I've done some spattering here, but I've done a lot more of something else. Can you see what it is? Yeah, runs. Runs are chance. You don't control those. They happen on their own without you controlling it, right? So that is there's a fairly high degree of chance happening. And then of course the spattering here, where I made these circles but wasn't real careful and I flung the paint around. Again, a kinesthetic. So there you go. I'll turn you around one more time. So that is 6 categories of abstract art represented in just this one painting. Let me walk over here very briefly and just show you some of my others that are very nearly finished. Again, composition, chance, a lot of kinesthetic in both of these. A lot of kinesthetic in that one. You can see the motion of my arms. A lot of kinesthetic there, a lot of chance, a lot of spattering there. And still composition. Same thing, a lot of kinesthetic motion, a lot of chance stuff happening, very focused on composition on that one, and likewise on that one. So I hope that helps. I hope that if you're an abstract painter, I hope that you'll watch this, and I hope you'll pass it on to some of your abstract painting friends. I'm going to continue painting here today using all of these principles. And now you know why I'm a card-carrying abstract painting snob, because I absolutely believe there's such a thing as good abstracts and not so good abstracts, okay? And if you're an abstract painter, I want you to be a good one. Hope this helps. Thanks for watching.